Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening where you are. I am Leticia Carvalho, and I'm very happy to serve as your moderator today. And in this capacity, I would like to welcome all of you to the webinar, Turning Off the Tap, a must-have space for our conversation on a very important topic. So I really want to thank everybody that is connected. Let me use quickly this opportunity just to alert that the webinar we will start. It is starting already, and really want to make sure that you have your housekeeping and all the connectivity issues well sorted. So in this webinar, please make sure that you have your audio and video, at least meanwhile the speakers are presenting, or the presenters are doing their presentations. Please make sure that your devices are well adjusted to the setting. In this webinar, UNEP will present the key findings from its newest report, Turning Off the Tap. The report was released yesterday, so these are very fresh news from 16 May. And this report provides insights on high potential solutions to end plastic pollution. We will then have an opportunity for questions, for interaction, and for that we have with us today a large group of the co-authors of this brand new report. They and we all together will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. So please bear with me. We have a very short dynamics in terms of 1 hour setting for this conversation, but we will do the best. And please share your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat function. So this is very important. So the team in support of this webinar can make sure that this is going to be brought into the attention. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recordings and slides will be made available online on the report source page. So I think the link definitely colleagues in support can put in the chat box, and so you can have post webinar access to all of the materials. So let me put a little bit of context for all of you from where we are coming from and what and how this report fit into the context and the landscape of negotiations of the second round of the INC, that is the intergovernmental process in charge of negotiating plastic pollution agreement along the whole life cycle. And this is fast approaching us in Paris. Is going to take place in Paris, France, from 29th May to 2nd June. And this is a very appropriate, timely moment to dig deeper and fully understand the magnitude and the nature of the changes required to end plastic pollution and create a circular economy for plastics. So it's an immense responsibility that this report is coming at this point and being able to influence very important moment where member states and multilateral community come together to take decisions, or at least to start to discuss about decisions. After the end of the second round of negotiations, the attention of the world will still be on plastics. And UNEP is very committed in delivering the world to keep up this conversation. So hosted by Côte d'Ivoire on the 5th June, we will celebrate the World Environment Day, focus on the theme Solutions to Plastic Pollution. And this year, our very important platform, the World Environment Day, is a reminder that people's actions matter and can further prompt actions by government and business towards ending plastic pollution. So it's really to bring attention to the collective efforts and the need to all hands on deck to achieve the results we all are aiming for in terms of ending plastic pollution at the earliest. It is time to accelerate these actions and transition to a circular economy. So the WAD is going as a reminding for this topic. And without further ado, let me hand over the floor to our first speaker to help to set the context for this conversation. It's my pleasure to introduce Sheila Agrahal-Khan. She's Director of Economy Division in United Nations Environment Program. She will set the scene and help us to navigate around the need for integrated solutions and system change to identify what is new in this report. And she will introduce the authors that were our brains and hearts behind the language and the text that we are making available today. Sheila, it's my pleasure to invite you to take the floor. The floor is yours, please.
Thanks, Letitia. So about a year ago, we embarked on this journey in response to a call from a lot of different, let's say, actors from government, from different stakeholder groups who said, well, is plastic pollution solvable? And if so, how? And so this analysis that we have done, which was launched just yesterday, was about what are the need for, how do we solve plastic pollution? Is it possible? And what would be needed? And we looked across the full life cycle of the plastics value chain to seeing what needs to be done. And the conclusion, of course, is what many of you probably already know, is that you have to take a more systemic approach to this. You have to look across the full life cycle, and you cannot just take actions at one part of the life cycle, because you may not be solving the full set of integrated actions that are needed. And this means looking upstream, midstream, downstream at all the actions that are needed. My colleague Jorenz will talk a little bit more about, the kinds of changes that are needed. But first, in terms of needing to reduce the scale of the problem, then the kind of market shifts that are needed, and then, of course, to deal with the legacy pollution. But throughout all this process, government policy, regulatory change is going to be needed to be able to bring an integrated set of solutions. So what is new that we bring? You've seen, I think, a flurry of publications over the past years coming through. But what is new in this publication is, on the one hand, the economic analysis. We show the kinds of economic costs to government and to society that are outweighing some of the positives in terms of the plastics economy, so much so that you may have serious, impacts on productivity in sectors like fisheries, tourism, and then growing amounts of research showing the health impacts and the environmental impacts in terms of impacts on wildlife, on livestock, etc. And then on the other hand, what is also new is the kind of integrated approach with these different market shifts that are needed, which Jorenz will talk a little bit more about. I wanted to use this opportunity to thank some of our partners in this process, Systemic and University of Portsmouth, who we have with us today, but also several of the partner agencies who we're working with on a plastics initiative, and several of the peer reviewers who have played an immense amount of work in terms of trying to help to strengthen the publication, make sure that it addresses all the kinds of challenges that have been posed that are stopping us moving from a linear economy to one that is more circular, and trying to see how do you innovate in this space so that there is a win for all players. So you'll see on the slide the very different people who have been engaged across this process, and then many more across all groups. In fact, many of you, I see the names of many of you here who have played a very important role in helping to shape this work and to build on even some of your own publications in this space. So thank you very much, Letitia. Back to you.
Extremely appreciated your initial comments, Sheila. I'm sure that what resonates for me is this process, and I'm sure this report and this conversation today will bring a lot of value, and also will be very appreciated by the community, bringing new analytics to our space. So I really appreciate your intervention, and let me now to transition to introduce Laurence Mila Canals. Laurence is the head of Life Cycle Initiative Secretariat in UNEP. I think no need for more presentations. I would like to give you the floor, Laurence, for you to elaborate on details, as Sheila mentioned, on the elements of the report. Over to you, Laurence.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leticia, for the introduction, and thanks also, Sheila, for the opening remarks. And obviously, good day to everyone, wherever you are. And thanks for participating in the webinar to present the Turning Off the Tap report. First, I would like to start by saying that this is a report that UNEP has produced in its own capacity as the kind of an advocate for the environment, and not as a secretariat of the INC, because this is a question that we get often. So we're obviously hoping that this report will be useful for the negotiators. It does not prejudge the content or the nature of the commitments that countries will identify as they negotiate the instrument in the INC process, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. This report is a substantive contribution on the way that UNEP is delivering to beat plastic pollution with the work that we're delivering on the ground, and also the campaigns like the End Plastic Pollution. So if we move to the next slide, we will dig or get straight into the matter. And Sheila already mentioned this economic analysis is a key important contribution from this report. And that's how the report starts highlighting that the root causes and the effects of the plastics economy. There are many of these root causes that are generating the problems, the plastic pollution that we see today. We see that products are generally designed to be used only once in a linear way. Therefore, they're losing their value very, very quickly, just many of them after a single use. These design, the products that are put in the market are not taking into account the local infrastructure. There's additives, hazardous additives, chemicals that are being used along the life cycle of products as well. They are not taking into account the needs on circularity. Waste management is obviously insufficient in many parts of the world. We don't have data. We're not collecting data. There's lack of clarity of what's happening. The result, and that's the important element, is that we have a stark economic reality. While we see on the one hand that the plastics economy generates revenues for a value of between $600 and $700 billion per year, the social and environmental costs that are estimated with plastic pollution along the whole life cycle are of the order of $300 to $600 billion per year. And this is a conservative estimate. We have cited as well other estimates from other reports that go even beyond this number. So moving to the next slide, the important thing is that because these root causes are many and they are affecting the whole plastic system, we need to have a systems change. We need to change the system if we want to address the problem. Plastic pollution is embedded across the plastics economy. Therefore, we need to change the way that plastics work in this economy. So moving to the next slide, this is already suggesting the approach that we are putting forward with the report. The idea is that we need to implement this whole systems change in an integrated way, looking at the whole life cycle, as Sheila was mentioning. And we need to pull all these necessary levers at once. So this is kind of a big ask, but that's what we identify that is needed in order to make a change. So first, we need to start eliminating the plastics that we don't need. We need to innovate across these three market shifts that you see highlighted in the slide, to push reusable products, to accelerate recycling, and to reorient and diversify the market for sustainable and safe plastic alternatives. And finally, we also need to assure that the safe disposal of whatever is not yet designed to be circular, and deal with the significant legacy of plastic pollution that has been accumulating over the years. So the report goes into some depth to enable this systems change and describes the type of enablers, the policies, the regulatory framework that is required, as well as what are the finance needs, what are the finance implications, what new business models we will need to pull this off to get us there. And of course, we also discussed to some length that given the international nature of the plastics economy, we also highlight that there are needs of harmonization in many of the approaches, because if one country goes in one direction and the next country goes in a slightly different direction, it will not work. So we need this system of harmonization and also a way of monitoring and reporting that can continue informing the actions and measure the progress achieved. So moving on to the next slide. What we have started modeling as well, so what the report puts forward is that if we continue the business as usual, this is the graph that you see on the left of your screens, the problem will be getting bigger. So this graph here shows the flow of virgin plastic that will continue to grow, the virgin plastic production. If you could just move one back, Murad, so we focus on the graph on the left. Thank you. And by increasing the virgin plastic production without growing enough, and it cannot grow enough, the end of life, the end of life will not be able to catch up. So we will see the amount of plastic pollution in the environment to continue to increase. And with it, as we have seen, the associated health and environmental costs. So now, yes, moving to the next graph on the right, we show the modeled flows, what has been modeled if focusing on the short-lived plastics, so 2/3 of the plastics economy, if we focus on implementing ambitiously all the systems, all the elements in the systems change that we just described, we see a significant reduction, well, first of the production or the consumption of virgin plastic. We see a significant increase in the circularity through the inner loops of reuse and recycling. And as a consequence as well, we see a significant reduction of the plastic pollution that ends in the environment. So the result is that we're avoiding 80% of the plastic pollution that would happen if we did nothing, if the business as usual continued. So moving to the next slide, we will move more to the good news that the report brings. And the good news is that with the systems change that is being proposed, there are great opportunities for economic prosperity. So we see here this headline message that in the next 20 years, by 2040, we could see savings of $4.5 trillion US, comparing the system change, the ambitious application and integrated application of systems change versus continuing business as usual. And this includes both direct savings in the economy, of investments in infrastructure that would no longer be required, and the operational cost of this infrastructure. But these are also coupled particularly with the big savings in externality costs, which are actually the biggest part of this 4.5 trillion. These will also bring in new jobs and improve livelihoods of millions of workers, as we will see. So moving on to the next slide, we'll see a bit more detail of these economic savings. So that's the temporal profile of the net savings. So comparing the business as usual with the systems change. This strengthens, if you want, the rationale for change, because it shows that the changes, as you can see at the top of this kind of the orange and the green sections, these changes in the direct change, in the direct costs of investments and operational expenditure, these changes might be relatively small, even though overall they are positive. So we're still saving money directly to the companies, to the governments that work on plastics. But the most important element is these bluer bars of the externality savings. And this is where we see huge opportunities that grow year on year, because as we implement and as we tighten the tap, if you want, on plastic pollution. So moving on to the next slide, because we don't have much time, just to say that then the report, apart from sharing this good news and the economic rationale of why we should do this, we go into some details of how to go about the systems change. To begin with, we need to reduce the size of the problem, as Sheila was saying, and this can be achieved by both eliminating the unnecessary products, the most problematic ones, products, polymers, chemicals, but also by shifting to reuse. So moving already to the first market shift that we need to see. We're proposing criteria to select which are the plastic products which are more problematic and unnecessary and that can be avoided. Examples of these are excessive headspace that is in packaging, products that are not accomplishing essential needs. I mean, the criteria are many. Some of the current uses of plastics can also be eliminated from the system. And sometimes we can shift from single use to reusable, which then also further reduces the need for plastic consumption. There are also innovation opportunities here to reduce unnecessary plastic consumption. moving to dry products. We don't need to ship around water, or we don't need to ship around air as we do with the headspace. So in total, we estimate that 30% of the short-lived plastics that would be used in the system by 2040 can be slashed down in this way. And that can start today. So moving to the next slide. After this elimination and reducing the size of the problem, we need to transform the plastics economy. And this is perhaps the key focus of the report. We focus on these three essential shifts that we can put the attention on. First, reuse, then recycling, and reorient and diversify. On the reuse shift, this is about accelerating the market for reusable products. It's about transforming the throwaway economy to a reuse society. And in order to do that, we need to create the enabling environment to ensure that the reuse market has stronger business case than the single-use plastics market. Here we're including refillable bottles, reusable bags, bulk dispenser. There are many potential solutions for reuse, and we probably need a combination of them all. Recycling shift. This is also about ensuring the economics of recycling. It's about ensuring that recycling becomes a stable and profitable venture. And in order to do that, we need to ensure that there is available feedstock, and that can be assured through regulation, through investment in infrastructure. We also need to ensure that the materials, the products are designed so they can be more easily, more economically recycled, and that also increases the profitability. We need to assure the collection. We need to assure that the demand for recycled content is there. So the report goes into some depth about how to make this recycling market work. And then finally, reorient and diversify. This shift is about shaping the market for plastics alternatives, and it's ensuring that the solutions, the substitutions that come, are actually sustainable, and therefore that we avoid replacing plastic products with alternatives that are actually simply changing the type of impacts rather than solving them. So move on, please, to the next slide to insist as well that in this systems change, we need to ensure that there is a just transition that provides opportunities for all. The report addresses the key needs of groups such as informal waste pickers, who assure today that there is a significant share of plastic waste that is being collected, but they need to see their place as well, and they need to see their safety and work conditions improved as we move to a more circular plastics economy. Moving on, and now we're getting to some of the final slides, so there is still time for discussion in the end. Let me just insist on a strong message that UNEP has been preaching for a while now, that we cannot recycle our way out of this problem, and we cannot ban our way out of the problem. We need an integration across the life cycle. We need integrated solutions. We need policymakers to embrace this approach that integrates regulatory instruments and policies across the whole life cycle. So we need governments and policymakers to push for design rules that make the products more economically recyclable. And they need to combine this with targets to incorporate recycled content, perhaps also combining with fiscal incentives for the recycling facilities and fiscal incentives for those who are following these targets. All of these will be mutually reinforcing, and they will help us reach the goal of transforming the economy. But we need not only policymakers, we also need businesses that individually move towards circularity to increase the efficiency, reduce their environmental impacts, and unlock new business opportunities. By making it profitable, by making this more responsible economy more profitable, and that's by changing the rules of the game, the regulations, businesses will naturally feel compelled to go to these positions. And of course, we need finance institutions to invest in a just transition and to help incentivize those companies that are moving towards circularity. And at the same time, put it more expensive for those companies that are not internalizing the externalities in their balance sheets. We obviously need all consumers. We need the whole of society. So just insisting a bit more that we need this integrated regulatory approach. So almost to end with this other slide, if you see now on this word cloud, I would like to say that beyond these key messages of the economic importance to implement the systems change, the overall approach to first reduce the size of the problem, then the market shifts, reuse, recycling, and reorient, and then to also deal with the plastic pollution legacy. The report also offers many practical recommendations. The whole idea of the report is to be a practical tool that helps guide the transition, but also offer some initial elements and tools in this transition about the key policies, regulations, technologies, business models. So the word cloud that you see on your screens is highlighting some of these practical resources that are provided in the report. Some of them take the shape of topic sheets in the report's resource page, which I think has already been shared in the chat. And there you will find all of these resources. There, more resources will probably be added in the future. Some of these elements are also explained through the report. I would simply like to highlight a couple of them. There is this one topic sheet on criteria for chemicals in plastics that you see kind of halfway in the middle of the cloud. I would also like to encourage you and to talk about another UNEP report that was launched a few days ago on chemicals in plastics. This topic sheet has been drawing significantly from that report, but of course that report goes into much more depth into the analysis of chemicals in plastics. And I believe the colleagues have also just shared the link in the chat. So please have a look at that. I would also like to highlight as well another of these topic sheets, the second one from the top, the one that is called Think Global, Act Local Now. And we insist on the now. Of course, the Think Global, Act Local, we've heard it for many years now. The point is we need to act now. And on this topic sheet, we have tried to explain how to get from this overall message of the report to the action on the ground. This is where governments can start, after you read the report, just go to this topic sheet. And I would really strongly encourage governments and everybody to have a look through the report, go to this very short topic sheet, and then start acting now. So move now to the final slide of my presentation, and thanks for your patience. Just to finish by stressing once more that this report is bringing good news. We're bringing the news that by 2040, it's estimated that the new plastics economy could create opportunities for jobs, new income and innovation, 700,000 additional jobs. This is a number that we've seen for a number of years. Obviously, improved livelihoods for millions of workers through working on a just transition. Close to $1.3 trillion savings. That's about 10% of savings compared to business as usual. And these savings would be in direct public and private costs between now and 2040. Importantly as well, we're quantifying the reduced damage to human health and the environment by reducing the exposure to hazardous chemicals through the 80% reduction of plastic pollution. 0.5 gigaton of CO2 equivalents of greenhouse gas emissions could be prevented every year. We could avoid close to $3.3 trillion US dollars of social costs between now as well and 2040. And that represents the 20% savings compared to the business as usual. This would also reduce liabilities, which we are seeing are likely to start increasing and legal cases against companies and against those who are pushing for plastic use. And of course, just to finish, that the time is of the essence, and that a 5-year delay in shifting to this systems change, in starting the process to change the plastics economy, would lead to increase 80 million metric tons of plastic pollution. So the report points at the integrated package of policy and regulatory measures, the kinds of pathways and the new business models that we need to enable us to change the system. Now it's time to get down to work and make it happen. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I'll be happy to continue with the panel, but over to you, Leticia, first of all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Laurence, for the brilliant presentation. I think after listening to your insights, it's good news. We have a pathway to systemic change. We can deliver this by 2040. So these are extremely good news. Congratulations for the report launch and for your presentation. Let me now move this very dynamic audience, because I have been watching in the chat box full of questions. So thanks for that. We are now 250 3 people in this call, and I think this gives us a great opportunity to use the time before we put hands on deck to reflect on the actions and having an open dialogue on how can we unpack the necessary measures to accelerate the just transition to a circular economy and of the plastics economy. So let me now invite a number of panelists, bringing back Sheila Agrahal-Khan and Laurence Canals to turn on the cameras, and then we can start to compose the panel to take questions and answers from the audience. So also we would like to invite the authors, the co-authors of the report. So let me just acknowledge Alison Gray Cairns, apologies if I mention in an inaccurate way, Peggy Leffort from UNEP, Alison also from UNEP, Peg Leffort from UNEP, Yoni Sharon, Systemic partner, Steve Fletcher, University of Portsmouth, and Andrea Bassi, founder and CEO of Knowledge. I really would like you and invite you to turn your cameras on. We can all see you, and then we can start to address some of the questions for hopefully dynamic interactions and reactions. So feel free to raise your hands in case you would like to react in one of the topics, but let me first take Peter Nish. He's mentioning an overall support for the publication to be very timely and important. The INC is just ahead of us. There are any envisaged presentation and of this report during the INC, and would be this used as a baseline for the future agreement? Can I address you, Laurence, I think on this relation with the report, the new information and the process? Or Sheila, who is the best one to come in here?
I'll probably defer to Sheila, but just to start, again, the report is presented to the INC, but the document for the INC, there's an options paper, and that's, I think, the main document that will be negotiated. Certainly, it will be great if negotiators want to also use this as a resource, and that's why we publish it 2 weeks in advance. But Sheila, over to you.
Thanks. So yeah, as you said, there's a different document that informs the INC that is based on member states' contributions and what they wanted to see as to be able to collate all of member states' views. This is an INF document that will go into the INC, so member states may choose to use it if they want. And we will have, I think it's 3 side events every day that are being run by different entities, and UNEP will be engaging in those side events and will be able to present in the events that we're in, we will be able to present some of the findings from this report.
Thanks a lot, Laurence, Sheila. I think this is very clear. Let me bring another, and taking advantage that you already have the mic, Sheila, let me continue with you, because I think there is a strategic question about the report speaks of fiscal incentives for recycling. I think the question, and thanks Ronald Steenblink, apologies for the question, is who pays? There are any funds ongoing towards recycling that can actually fit the bill of the existing market and the future and additional, let's see, capacity in recycling? Let me start with you, Sheila, and then perhaps bring Peggy in complementation. Over to you, Sheila.
Okay, good. So one of the fiscal policies that is being used to, you could say, to seed fund some of the recycling waste management work is coming from EPR, so extended producer responsibility. So it's not that the government is subsidizing the funding of this, of dealing with plastic pollution, but rather charging a fee to companies. So for example, in Kenya, where I'm based, the country is putting in place an EPR system where companies would be across, I think it's 6 different sectors, are being charged a fee, and that fee is being used to, you could say, to part fund some of the costs that are going to be needed to deal with some of the plastic pollution challenges. So of course, our hope is that, you know, it's not society having to subsidize any of this, but rather that, you know, as companies look at the, let's say, the full economic costs of the impacts of pollution, that countries will be putting in place systems like EPR systems, where then the companies themselves producing the plastic or the plastic product are paying that part of the cost if they haven't transitioned to something that is more benign in terms of pollution.
Thanks a lot, Sheila. Let me add, Peggy. I would love to hear, Peggy, if you have additional reflections on, for example, bringing examples to us, for example, tax on plastic products or packaging. There any pathway that you could like to articulate, that you would like to articulate for us? Peggy, over to you.
Yes, sure, sure. Tax on virgin plastic can be really a very important element, not only to, of course, to generate revenues and additional revenues, which can then be redirected to reduce solutions, recycling, but also to help shift behaviors and to reduce our consumption and bend the consumption curve. And if we take the example of recycling, for instance, recycling can really be accelerated by improving its economics, because for now, recycling markets cannot really take off, while virgin plastics has a lower price than secondary plastic. So, for instance, putting a tax or a levy on virgin plastic could be a strong incentive to help accelerate recycling and tackle the problem of that we see currently with prices of virgin plastic being 10 to 47% lower in Europe, for instance, than recycled plastic. So yes, it can be absolutely an important part of the solution. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And let me perhaps take us to a different kind of consideration, bringing Steve Fletcher to address Rotier's cicada question. Is there any strategy to eliminate pre-existing plastics pollution, the ones that are already somehow available into the environment, ocean, rivers, and everywhere else? Steve, could you comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Letitia. I mean, yes, I mean, of course, there are plenty of methods out there that enable us to do that, capturing plastics that are coming down rivers using some filtration equipment. There are opportunities to improve the technology we have in recycling sites where a lot of microplastics are coming from the recycling sites themselves, potentially. So yeah, there's a whole area of innovation there that we can draw upon to take some of the plastics out of the environment that are there already. Yes, absolutely.
Great. This brings hope to along the whole life cycle, as Sheila just mentioned. So let me now create an opportunity for, I think you, Yoni, Shirin, would be very happy if you can elaborate a little bit. How do you see addressing, or the industry and the private sector addressing single use of plastics, while the economies are heavily relying on this kind of material, and also, of course, against the poor landscape of the waste management capacity in several countries in the world. So please step in, Yoni.
Thanks, Leticia. I think there's a lot that industry can do to reduce its reliance on single-use packaging and on plastics in general. And in fact, I think industry is doing a lot already. There's many companies that have given us great examples of how they can lean in even before regulation is in place and take very ambitious action. We see in the context of the instrument that is being negotiated by the INC, there's the Business Coalition to End Plastic for the Global Plastic Treaty, and they're showing great examples of how industry can lean in. At the same time, I think a lot more can be done, and I think this report calls out on some of the things that can be done by industry to take it further. I won't go through everything that's in the report, but obviously reduction and reuse as one of the main transformations that is talked about. Industry has a role there to bring innovation to market. Recycling also, design for recycling is a key enabler to scale recycling systems. Really, if you look at the three transformations that are at the core of the report, industry has a big part, together with governments and governments and regulators who are setting the policies to ensure these transitions happen.
Brilliant. And this brings a lot of excitement. Let me bounce back to you, Andrea Bassi. I think there is a very exciting question here. What are your recommendations to create an infrastructure that streamlines the disassembly and reuse of plastic products? Are there benefits of a collaborative infrastructure, or are there barriers that require companies to act one by one? So if you can address this, would be brilliant to listening.
Sorry, Leticia, maybe I'll jump in because Andrea couldn't join us. He had a last minute, so apologies that yeah, we couldn't take him off the slide. But no, but certainly I think that's a very good question, and maybe I'll also suggest others to chip in on the investment in infrastructure, particularly for reuse. This is, I think, one key element that we see as absolutely necessary, bringing in the necessary changes in the systems that we have today. There is a very, I think, very adequate saying that you cannot run trains on roads. And in the same way, you cannot run reusable products on a system that has been made for single-use products. So we will need this investment in shared infrastructure, particularly that companies moving to reuse can all share and therefore make efficiencies and economies of scale. So I hope that addresses part of the question. And I don't know if other colleagues want to chip in, otherwise maybe you can move to the next one.
Anyone with appetite to take on this one? Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Please. Just to build on Lorenz's answer, I think one other really critical requirement to move towards reuse is a certain amount of standardization, where there are at least coherent standards that are applied across multiple reuse systems. And that is also something that the global treaty process could play a part in developing those international standards. Thanks, Leticia.
Thanks a lot, Steve, and great, Lorenz, for your approaching the question and the answer. I think I would like to bring now Alison, our colleague in UNEP, to face one of the very interesting questions in our chat. That is, industry is looking for economic opportunities as well in this transition. Plastic alternatives at the end are seen as one of these options, but plastics alternatives are still plastics in the majority. So would be better to go in discussions with the industry in terms of better substitutes for the fossil fuel-based plastics. Are you following the trends in the industry discussions on this topic? Alison, over to you.
No, thank you very much, Leticia. I mean, I think when you look at, and Lawrence mentioned it in his presentation, that there's going to be a net gain of something like 700,000 jobs and improvement in livelihoods under the systems change scenario compared to business as usual. And when you think of the multi-millions that are employed in this industry altogether, that is the very good news. And you can see as part of that transition, clearly there's going to be job creation. There's going to be job creation in the expansion of collection and sorting. There's going to be job creation in the circularity. And we know that circularity typically is more labor intensive as opposed to more linear processes, and we think there's going to be a decline in sort of virgin plastics, but there is important that there is an investment in this transition, and it's done carefully, and it's part of I think, in line with the what's going on in the intergovernmental I&C process as well. And as Steve pointed out, there's hopefully coming, as part of that will be policy coherence and incentivization that will help open up, one, reward the fast moving companies. And you talked about, are we following the trends? Absolutely, there's a high ambition coalition already looking at setting targets. So there's real momentum building in this space on a voluntary basis. So the first movers will be rewarded in that respect. So yes, I mean, I think that there are important economic opportunities. I think the transition will have job creation, it will have job displacement, but overall there's going to be a net gain, which is, and there's a clear roadmap set out by this ending plastics pollution report that will help guide businesses. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alison. Brilliant. Any other panelists would like to come into this question, or can we move further? Exciting. The chat is just burning, just to tell you. So it's super exciting. Okay, so I cannot see hands up. Let me just bring, and I will throw this to the panel and see who wants to step in this conversation. But I think it's a very important reflection. The report suggests that the costs related to using plastic waste as an alternative fuel in the cement kilns could be tied to plastic credits associated with non-recyclable plastic from cleanup activities. And then there is the concern on how alternatives in the recycling industry could somehow not harm or add additional releases or leakages of plastics into the environment, considering that this may promote burning plastic waste overall. I think this is one of the concerns flagged in the international community following this topic. So alternatives in recycling are not going to harm or shouldn't harm the environment. So any insight from the authors or reviewers on how to deal with this element? Additional and alternatives are not harming environment.
Maybe I'll jump in. Thanks, Leticia.
One.
And I think this, well, it's actually a very wide question from what I followed, and I'm sorry because I hadn't seen it in writing. But so there's several elements. I think there was also first the element of the cement kilns and the proposal of the report. So yeah, just to be very clear, this is not something that we're recommending to do, but the report is studying this as one of the options that is being used today. And then we comment on what elements would be important. One key issue there is that we're talking about plastic waste that is not recyclable. So this burning of plastic, which in general we would like to avoid at all costs. Once you have plastic that is completely not recyclable, then burning it in a cement kiln that already exists, as long as there are enough standards, enough filters to avoid the hazardous emissions, it's a possibility to be considered, but it's not something that we're recommending. And please remember that this is what we're trying to do with whatever is left that cannot be dealt with the changing the system, and that is already in either in the environment or accumulating in dump sites. So that's first one thing. Then, of course, in terms of the alternatives, I didn't quite get whether this was related to alternative processes and technologies for recycling. But I think one key element as well that the report is putting out there. Let's say none of the solutions that we have out there might be absolutely perfect in itself. And we're pointing at those elements that require still agreement on standards of ways to do things the most and potentially unsafe. We have a lot of reservations. I saw another question there about chemical recycling. There's a lot of reservations, but the point is this is a technology that potentially could help. It's not probably there yet today, but it has a potential as long as enough guardrails are put there and standards that can ensure the safety. So just a few more cents, and maybe others want to chip in as well. Thanks.
Someone else to chip in on the topic? Okay, so let me continue on recycling, but a very interesting angle. Give the vast difference in recycling rates for different polymers. Is there a need to address polymer-specific solution rather than general plastic solutions? Who wants to take this one?
So I'm happy to jump in. This is Yoni.
Yes.
I just typed in the question in the chat as well, but I'm happy to answer it here. Absolutely, the different polymers of plastic clearly have very different solutions because they have very different economics. You cannot compare a plastic bottle to a plastic bag to a sachet. Each of these require completely different solutions. And therefore, the work that is, the modeling that is underlying this report distinguishes between different categories of plastic. We didn't do it polymer by polymer, but we did it category by category, depending on the solutions that are applicable to each category. So for example, bottles were differentiated from rigid monomaterials, differentiated from flexible monomaterials, multi-layers, household goods. Each of these categories were modeled separately. Similarly, we also differentiated between different regions because the solutions that are applicable in New York are completely different from those in Jakarta, or even within Indonesia. You know, Jakarta is very different from a small island. So all these things have been accounted for in the model. It's definitely not just one big category. Of course, the results that Laurence presented today have aggregated things up, but the underlying work differentiates the solutions that are needed for each category and for each geography.
Yes, thanks a lot, Yoni, for jumping in. Anyone else with appetite for this answer or touching on this topic? Let me then move. I cannot see any, so let me then move for another one. Very interesting question that I think, Sheila, you could address because it's a key element of the transition or systemic transition that UNEP is very much championing. So most of companies are looking for footprint reduction. And when we look to alternatives to plastics, they generate maybe more same footprint. Any advice or experience on that, on guidance from UNEP side? Over to you, Sheila.
Yeah, thank you. So in fact, it's a very big worry because in fact, I was at a meeting recently and given a book that I was told, a writing pad that I was told was recyclable. It turned out to be a book, instead of being made of paper, was made of plastic. And I thought, oh my God, imagine when I'm done with this book, nobody will know what to do with it. They'll have no clue it's plastic and it's put into a recycling plant for paper, and you know, you've messed up a whole system. So there is a lot of innovation that is leading us into a wrong space. I think what would be really important is to have criteria on what are feasible substitutes or alternatives. At the end of the day, we don't want to go from one material that is not recyclable to another one that is not either reusable or recyclable. So we want, and we don't want also alternatives or substitutes that are causing deforestation, that having high, you know, land use impacts, or for that matter, having greenhouse gas impacts. So a single-use aluminum bottle isn't not going to be preferable over a single-use plastic bottle. They're just both going to have very negative impacts. So what we do need to ensure is that proper life cycle analysis is taken and that there are incentives given to those substitutes and alternatives that are really not creating a further environmental impact, so that we incentivize this market. And that's one of the things in the publication which talks about this being a very important part of the market, is how do you create the market incentives for alternatives and substitutes.
Brilliant, thanks for that. And let me move the conversation as we look to the end and wrap up of this session. Let me move the conversation back to finance. And there is a very interesting and big concern, seems topic in a question that is about finance being a very relevant topic for the upcoming INC2 or negotiations in Paris. So what are the thoughts on the amount of financing needed? And I think even more important, the types of financing available, or the ones that could be created, and how potentially financing mechanism could look like. So may I bring you, Alison, and then Peggy with a bit of reflections on the financing and the finance mechanism that eventually the process will put in place? Over to you.
Maybe I can start.
Go ahead.
So yes, finance will be key. So what you will see in this report is that what we have modeled is on the basis of the modeling by Systemic is that in order to put in place this system change by 2040, so for short-lived products, it's $1.2 trillion investments which are needed. And what is more important, I would say, rather than only having an idea of the total size of investment, is also where to direct investments and financial flows. Because there will be need to reduce financial flows towards, for instance, virgin plastic production, but also a need to increase financial flows towards reuse new delivery models. We have modeled that for an amount of $600 billion by 2040 for reuse and new delivery models. For collection, formal sorting in middle and low income countries by 2040 for an amount of 230 billion. So it's what is really important to understand is also where to direct financial flow towards, and that's what the negotiation of the treaty can help us to better understand. And that's the enabling environment that the treaty can help us to create to better understand also how to put a financing mechanism which will solve this issue of how to direct correctly the financial flows.
Thanks a lot, Peggy. Any complementary thoughts, Alison?
I mean, just maybe with just one. I mean, I think one of the challenges of the whole plastics pollution piece is the internalizing the externalities, and that's game changing. And I think as part of, there is a broader trend around how do we internalize externalities. And I think it comes to the fore when we're talking about pollution, and actually a lot easier than other areas, other systems like food systems. And I think that should be taken into consideration when looking at the financial flows and financial mechanisms. And from a business point of view, having worked in this area a bit myself, and we've got we've got some great programs here at UNEP looking at this in other sectors, is that it's doable. It is doable for businesses to start to understand their externalities and start to reflecting those in their decision making. And I'm hopeful that as part of the broader I&C process and the broader debate and dialogue that will go alongside it, that internalizing externalities in practical ways is one of the areas that can be discussed and debated. Over.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thanks, Peggy. Yoni, I can see you.
One word on that. I see we're almost at time, so I'll make it very quick. But this question of financing is critically important. And it also, I would also like to go back to Ronald's question at the beginning about the question of who pays, because this is such a critical question. And so I think two thoughts on that, just to complement what Peggy and Alison just said. The first is not all solutions cost money. There's plenty of solutions that are described in the report that actually do not require additional investment from anybody. So this question of who pays can almost become redundant for certain solutions. Just one example, design for recycling. If we design and design for reuse, if we design our products and our products for recycling and for reuse, and if we have better harmonized requirements for these things, we can have a more efficient system that nobody has to pay. It's just a more efficient use of resources, because plastics have been designed to be reused or to be recycled, and therefore the economics, things that today are not in the money, could be in the money if they were designed properly. So that's the first point. There's plenty of solutions that do not require net investment. And then for the ones that do require, obviously some do require investments. I think under baseline, we're also investing hundreds of billions of dollars into the system. So it's not like only the system change scenario requires investment. Also the baseline would require investment. The big difference is the system change scenario, in fact, requires less investment than the baseline. It's just some of these investments are in newer technologies, newer solutions that are more risky because they're less well understood. So there is kind of, we have to be honest, and obviously we talk about this in the report, there is in some solutions of the system change scenario, higher risk involved relative to the solutions in the baseline scenario. And this is something that governments with good policy and with good incentives can help de-risk these investments. So it's not necessarily a matter of more money, it's just making sure that the risk return profile of these investments makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Yoni. With your last words, I would say and announce that we need to wrap up here, unfortunately, because I have the feeling that we could stay in this conversation for much longer, but unfortunately it's time to close. I would like to say congratulations to the authors, to UNEP for putting out there this very helpful, instrumental and innovative information. We have the house very well stated. We need to start to juggle with all of this in a cohesive manner. I would like to thank a lot the audience for sustaining very high numbers into the very last minute of this conversation. My sense is this will need more and more, more opportunities. Thank you very much to everybody. I see there are more questions in the chat. I will make sure that this will find the follow-up track with the authors. Looking very much to see you in upcoming conversations on this topic and wishing the best for the ones that are going to INC2 in France. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.